Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday morning to you all. I hope you guys are waking up and having a wonderful start to your day. And I hope everyone's been having a great beginning to their new week out there so far. There's a few things to talk about in this morning's video, as areas of the country once again runs the risk of strong to severe thunderstorms. Now, it's not going to be even comparable to yesterday's event where we had the nasty line of storms. We had several tornadoes across Texas and Oklahoma. Today's event will mainly be a damaging wind threat. Now, of course, we're going to get hail for certain areas, certain storms, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get some tornado warnings out there for certain areas also. But all in all, not even comparable to the last really couple days. But we'll break down what we do know. First thing we'll speak on is current conditions, the latest outlooks, and then we'll break down the country section by section. And as always, we'll zoom into individual states that do run the higher risk of strong to severe thunderstorm activity. And then we'll speak a little bit on the pattern out ahead, just really over the next, I would say, few to several days. After we get past today, I will start to spend a little bit more time towards the end of the videos just speaking on the pattern going further out, like I'm talking about 7, 10, maybe even 14 days out. And I know a lot of people enjoy that, and I enjoy talking about the longer range also, but there's just been so much right in front of us to speak on that really haven't had a lot of time to spend attention on way out or anything like that. But we'll get to that, and we'll certainly get detailed on that over the next couple of days. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below, and I'll get caught up with all the comments from over the weekend later on this afternoon. So let's get rocking and rolling. So this is the country. The western U.S. is quiet. The eastern half of the U.S., lower 48, there is definitely areas of energy all over the place. There's one in Wisconsin. You got this little spinning area, this upper low kind of dropping down. There's literally a spin on radar, and we just got some rain, nothing too crazy in the form of storms or anything like that, but we do have some energy kind of stretching from the Mississippi Valley and now getting into the Ohio Valley region. Even a storm right this second that is severe warning, and we got a lot of tropical moisture, kind of the leftovers from that intense line of storms is sweeping southeastward across areas of the western deep south. And we just got a lot of energy across Alabama and Mississippi also. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised we end up getting some flash flood warnings soon with this, because it's not, it looks like it's just kind of moving over some of the same areas. So we actually do have flash flood warnings here in southern areas of Georgia. So you're waking up to a very rainy or stormy start, or if it's not doing anything right now, it could do something here in the coming hour or two. A little bit of rain across New England, the Northeast. And yeah, outside of that, like I said, western U.S., pretty quiet. So we take a look at watches, warnings, and advisories here. Stop that. We do have the severe thunderstorm watches ongoing for the complex of storms moving across southeast Texas and Louisiana. Not only do we have heat advisories in the orange up here in the Pacific Northwest, we actually have red flag warnings too. So the heat combined with the dry conditions, just be aware of fire danger out here. Flood watches are up for areas of New York and PA also. I know my face always covers up southern areas of Texas here. I'm sorry, southern areas of Florida. Haven't done that in a while. I used to do it all the time for whatever reason, mix up Florida with Texas, but there's nothing going on as far as watches and warnings for the southern tip of Florida. So this is that. We'll continue to move forward. As far as the update from the Storm Prediction Center, we have a very large slight risk stretching up into areas of the Ohio Valley, into sections of pretty much up the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. This includes all of West Virginia, a good chunk of PA, up into the southern tier of New York. This drops all the way down to eastern Kentucky, western areas of Virginia, western areas of North Carolina, and includes middle to eastern Tennessee, and includes a good chunk of the deep south, if not pretty much all of the deep south. All of South Carolina does sneak into the sand hills of North Carolina. So a weird looking kind of shape of a slight risk right here. Marginal risk around it, level 1 out of 5 in the dark green. And we do have kind of a secondary area to watch up here in lower Michigan that does have a level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather, with an upper low swinging in and bringing some overlapping conditions that do support severe weather. Marginal risk does connect out to the southern high plains. We have a slight risk in areas of New Mexico and a very small section of Texas. Now, what's driving all this? Yesterday, we had a 2% risk of a tornado that stretched all the way through Georgia and the Carolinas. This morning, we're not waking up to that. They've kind of cut that off, and I'm not surprised based off what I was seeing last night. But 2% risk of a tornado continues for Alabama and Mississippi. And then we got one up here for the Ohio Valley, and this makes sense just with better kinematics. And we'll speak on these areas and zoom into Ohio, West Virginia, PA, and New York for you folks up there. And then a damaging wind threat, pretty much what's driving the entirety of the slight risk. So if you live in these yellow areas, that is a 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles of any given location. And the hail threat's not a big deal today, actually. So there's not even, as of right now, that could change in the next update. But as of right now, the highest we got out there is a 5% risk in the brown of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. Now we take a look at the excessive rainfall outlook. There's 3 areas to watch. This one, this area across the deep south, and then up here in portions of the mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, and New England area. So 15% risk in the yellow areas of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance. So we could get some flash flooding today, so don't ignore that. And taking a look at the tropics, tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days. And any kind of activity we were seeing down there from the CAG to Central American Gyrum, nothing really shows like it's going to organize. And, you know, every time it seems like we get a hint at maybe we get some consistency with the models and showing something down there, it kind of just fades away. So what I'm trying to say is there's really nothing to discuss in regards to the tropics. But like I said, I want to continue to throw this in there. Day by day, we get deeper and deeper into hurricane season. But it is a very slow very slow climb to peak hurricane season through the summer. So the southeast, just a broad look at everything first. You're just going to see waves of storms sweeping across different areas. I mean, like I said, if I miss anybody, I just want to always take this broad look at things first. But we get to about, this is 7 o'clock Eastern time. You see just waves of storms everywhere. One right here in Georgia, back here in Alabama, eastern Tennessee, clusters of storms back in Mississippi. I mean, you got storm activity everywhere, you know, even Louisiana, some storms in southeastern sections of the state, some pop-up activity more so in Florida, sea breeze type stuff. And then we wake up tomorrow morning with probably a line of storms moving across Florida, the panhandle of Florida, and areas of Georgia. So just taking a closer look at these areas here, we'll start off west to east, Kentucky, Tennessee. This morning we'll probably get some energy that will make its way into the western areas of both of these states. We take it to about lunchtime. This kind of line of storms could become a little bit more organized. So noon, lunchtime, Bowling Green, Elizabethtown, up to Louisville, down to Clarksville, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee. Could get a line of storms that begins to sweep through. We take it to about 3 o'clock. Based off the HRRR model, it says these storms are kind of breaking apart somewhat up here in Kentucky, but they look like they're holding steady here in Middle Tennessee. And then we start to take it to, say, 5 o'clock. And this is when we start to potentially get an organized line of storms in the eastern half of Tennessee, the Cumberland Plateau. And these will eventually try to sneak into the Tennessee Valley. And then we'll eventually hit the Smokies and the mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina. But how intense will these storms be? Not quite sure. But, I mean, there's a good chance the entire eastern and middle portion of Tennessee and even Kentucky is going to get wet today. And then all that energy begins to head on off to the east. Anything into the overnight hours? Nah, I'm not seeing anything. Alabama and Mississippi. So there is a lot of storm activity in the southern halves of these states right at this second. We start to take it to about midday. This is 12 o'clock. Some more activity could get going here in the northern sections of these two states while activity remains for the southern areas of these states. So, I mean, you stop at around lunchtime, you got storms sort of scattered and smothered everywhere. But, in general, there is a slight risk in certain areas, especially into Alabama. And there is a 2% risk of a tornado for some of these. So just be careful with these clusters of storms. They'll be dancing around everywhere. For example, you see this little circle squiggly line coming off this cell down here close to Monroeville. This indicates maybe a rotating updraft, more intense updraft, so maybe some stronger storms down here. But it's scattered everywhere. 4 o'clock, we got storms up here. We got more of an organized area of storms down here. And we get a 5, 6, 7. And we got more storms getting going near Hattiesburg down to the Gulfport area. And just scattered stuff everywhere. And then 10 p.m., storms, and especially in southwest Alabama. We got storms all the way down to the Gulf coastline. And we continue to midnight. We're probably just going to get kind of a cluster energy of an area of storms kind of moving out the southeastern portion of Alabama into Georgia. And then it should calm down a little bit after midnight in these areas. But, talking about rainfall, we could get a good bit of it in these areas. And I switch to this and I look at that. It's rainfall between now and 7 p.m. tomorrow. I mean, if you live down here in the southern areas of Alabama, you could get 3 to 4 inches of rain. The color key down here, that yellow color right there, that's 4 inches of rain. So Monroeville, Dothan, 2 to as much as 4 inches of rain. So a good bit of rain will fall in these regions. Now, Georgia and South Carolina, I live here in central South Carolina. It's an interesting day trying to figure it out. But we'll start off around mid-morning, 10 a.m. We'll take it to about lunchtime. Some storms, very isolated about out there in central Georgia. Nothing too crazy. We take it to 2 p.m. You could get hit by some downpours, maybe a storm or two in Atlanta. We got some storms clustering up here in the low country of South Carolina. We take it about 5 p.m. Everybody heading home from work. This is when we start to get some individual cells. And, once upon a time, as in last night, we had a 2% risk of a tornado in this area. We don't anymore. That doesn't mean that we couldn't get one. Just always remember that. There's been many times it happens every single year where we get a tornado in a sub 2% risk day. But you get these isolated to scattered cells developing across Georgia. They look kind of like they're by themselves, so they'll be able to take more advantage of the players in the atmosphere, if you will. But a little bit of activity near Myrtle Beach, some action near Columbia, maybe the western Midlands of South Carolina, which doesn't need any more storm activity. You guys have been hit hard over the last weekend. But then we'll watch 6, 7, and this is when all these storms that could be kind of semi-discrete at first try to cluster up together. So we get this big, you might want to call that unorganized, but it's still just an area of energy kind of surging through the eastern sections of Georgia, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., kind of a Boeing feature going across the low country in southern Midlands of South Carolina, 9 p.m. Looks like a pretty intense area of storms. Remember, there is a slight risk for these areas for a reason. So, it looks pretty stormy in Georgia and South Carolina today. A lot of people are cleaning up. Heading to church yesterday, a lot of people are still without power, but heading to church yesterday morning, trees down. Nothing too crazy like Helene, but that line of storms that moved through Saturday night across northern areas of Georgia into the Midlands of South Carolina, man, it did some damage. It was a nasty area of storms, but so we'll just have to get through today, and I think it'll begin to calm down somewhat tomorrow. Still a risk of storms, but 3 a.m., 4 a.m., another area of storms, probably more so impacts southern areas of Georgia. And people diss on the HRRR model a lot. I always look at it, it's either choose out the NAM or HRRR or show both. And if I showed both, the videos would go on for another 30 minutes, and they go on long enough. But I'm always going to side with the HRRR model if I'm comparing to the NAM. And I think the HRRR model has done pretty well over the weekend with trying to figure out where the storms are. No model is going to be perfect, but just be careful with these clusters of storms. We could get some damaging winds for sure. And then we head on up to North Carolina and Virginia, and we take it to about midday. Looks pretty quiet. Take it to about 3 p.m. Ain't a whole lot going on. 6 p.m., then some scattered stuff begins to develop. You see southeast North Carolina, a little bit of storm activity. And then we get to 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. It really takes until all the way till pretty much after the sun sets for anything to get going. We got some storms down here near the Sand Hills and the Piedmont, North Carolina. They don't look all that bad, though. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. But remember, models could always fail at this, and they're worse than what's being modeled. So all in all, it doesn't look too bad in this area. Now the Northeast, broad look at things first. We got some showers out and about across interior sections of New England. Then some more energy is going to surge up through Ohio, and you got to watch out for these cells here. I wouldn't be surprised if, they upgraded the outlook in these regions. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised they bumped it up to a 5% risk of a tornado. But these cells right here kind of riding eastern Ohio into northwestern PA, western areas of New York. Got to watch these in this area of storms. By the time we get into this evening, it starts to impact all western New York, rides across the northern areas of PA, and then we're waking up tomorrow morning to the leftovers of it across the northeast and some shower activity across the Tidewater, Delmarva, and southern areas of New Jersey. And then we're just going to have probably a rainy day across New England for tomorrow. But taking a closer look at some of these states, Ohio is an area to watch out for, and it's really for the extreme eastern half of Ohio. This is 4 p.m. You see these cells here? Lancaster, Newark, up to Canton, Akron, points east. You got to watch out for these cells. The environment's improving in this area that's not being kind of tapped into energy-wise. So these cells right here in Ohio could produce a tornado. There is a 2% risk of a tornado up here. But 5 p.m., 6 p.m., you see that line right there? This indicates a stronger, potentially rotating updraft beginning to move over out of Ohio into western PA. And then by the time you start to get to 7, 8, 9 p.m., I think things begin to quiet down. It's just this time frame right after lunchtime. Bang, storms develop. And I think the atmosphere will be supportive of something tricky in this area. So if you live in this region of Ohio, obviously not trying to freak you out, but be aware. Don't let it catch you by surprise. There's a couple tornado warnings today. I know it's not a very high risk of severe weather or tornadoes, but there is a risk. And then West Virginia, models are kind of jumping this area. It takes the energy that moves out of Kentucky, Ohio, sort of weakens it. It does show a stronger to severe cell here in the panhandle of West Virginia. We'll see if that actually happens. And sometimes the HRRR model can nail this stuff. It absolutely nailed a storm in the panhandle of Oklahoma yesterday, far western panhandle, that actually produced the first tornado of the day. Storm Chaser was on it, and the HRRR model nailed it. So 7 p.m., panhandle of West Virginia, western Maryland. Be careful with a couple maybe supercells in this area. But it shows a lot of the activity weakening. If you live in western Maryland, Hagerstown points west, you could get some nasty storms later on this evening. And then we start to get into, say, the overnight hours. I forgot, I only have it 18 hours out. And it does begin to calm down after that. Now, PA, starting off around 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., we got some cells. Grove City up to Erie, Jamestown, New York. Just be careful in this corridor right in here of PA. Same thing with eastern Ohio. I could see this area having a sneaky tornado threat. You see some of those lines coming off those storms, especially 4 to 6 p.m. Watch out for these storms here in northwestern PA, probably north of Pittsburgh. But these could produce, obviously, some gusty, damaging winds, even some hail, and they could produce a quick spin up. And then a lot of this energy begins to weaken, but we got to watch a couple cells that will emerge into southern areas of PA, and then the leftovers of this storm from the action from Ohio will sweep across sections and pretty much almost all of PA, but especially northern PA. It still shows these storms being pretty intense around 11 o'clock tonight, well north of State College, and then these head on off, and then probably after midnight we'll get some more clusters of storms near Williamsport, maybe eventually getting into Scranton. And by the time waking up tomorrow morning, could be I wouldn't say active as far as crazy severe weather, but it definitely could be, a loud morning and just a lot of rainfall from Scranton, Hazleton, down to Allentown. You guys could definitely wake up to some downpours and storm activity. Now, taking a look at New York, I would watch out especially for the far southwestern areas of the southern tier. We could get some energy that will sweep from Buffalo, Rochester up to Watertown to the Tuckhill Plateau. But it's these storms around 6 p.m. Buffalo, Jamestown, Rochester. These storms right here could do something tricky. I wouldn't be surprised you get a tornado warning out of this. You see, the circle areas coming off some of these cells, like I said, indicating more intense, stronger updrafts, maybe rotating. Western New York, 6, 8 o'clock, give or take an hour. A stormy, potentially a strong to severe storm type evening for you folks. And this will continue. It'll reach Syracuse, Watertown, eventually into Binghamton, into the late night hours. But it does show all this eventually weakening. But we're probably going to be dealing with some rain, heavy rain across areas of New England tomorrow morning. So just be aware of those areas for sure. And One thing I didn't really mention was rainfall across some of these areas. So let's just throw that up there real fast for us. And rainfall, not a whole lot for Ohio. There is an area to watch for half an inch to maybe an inch of rain in southeast Ohio. And then we'll take a look at PA here. A lot of rain could fall in areas of PA as these storms sort of cluster up together later tonight. But that red area, that's where over 2 inches of rain could fall. But a lot of areas show over an inch of rain. But moving to the south central U.S., this area of storms will continue to trail off probably into the Gulf here. And then we'll get a calm period. We're probably going to get a little bit of storm activity. I would say a lot, probably in the southern half of Louisiana into the overnight hours, or to the evening hours, I would say. And then we'll have to watch for some energy that kind of comes out of eastern sections. Well, it comes out of New Mexico, goes across eastern areas of New Mexico, and then we'll have to watch a couple individual cells that develop down here in southwest Texas. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of uptrend. What is it right now? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised they put a slight risk down here in southwestern areas of Texas. Wouldn't be surprised one bit for a couple supercells that could form and do something tricky here. But you kind of keep this going, and we could get a cluster of storms later tonight. It's like the overnight hours that sweeps across western and southwestern really areas of Texas. And then this will be riding the Mexico-Texas border tomorrow morning. So, yeah, I mean, they're probably going to give a slight risk upgrade in this area somewhere here in probably about an hour, hour and a half. But just a closer look at New Mexico. Area of energy will shoot off this area kind of east of Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And if you live in Roswell, Clovis, down to Hobbs, watch out from like 4 to 8 p.m. Could get a line of storms. And down here near like Carlsbad, I think is how you say it. These storms could be quite intense. I mean, you could get some very large hail with these. And like I said, I'm very surprised there's not a slight risk kind of extending into Texas here with this area of storms. But this is 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, and then the storms could potentially get even more intense into the overnight hours as you start to get down here. So, the north central U.S., just watch out. This is about midday. You see some of those yellows and oranges up there in northern areas of Wisconsin, the UP and Michigan. Some of these storms up here, guys, Stephen, Lisa, you guys could end up getting some small hail from this, cold air aloft. And then you got the cells here in lower Michigan. And this kind of area of energy that sweeps through lower Michigan, this could produce some small hail, some gusty winds, a marginal risk in place. When you have that cold air aloft, it aids in lapse rates. Lapse rates means that you're getting a drop in temperatures at a quicker rate the higher up you get in the atmosphere, and in this case you'll have that, a lot of colder air aloft, and this actually promotes more fuel in the atmosphere. So it'll be there across lower Michigan today, but even the UP of Michigan, I wouldn't be surprised to get some small hail with this, but this will all sweep through, and then we'll get into tomorrow. So just be aware of that. Western U.S., just some dancing showers out there across the Four Corners region, Nevada, Northern California, Southeast Oregon. But outside of that, not a whole lot to speak on. And then temperatures, you got this big upper low kind of bowling down. So temperatures will remain cool in the upper Midwest. But you can see how the surface temperatures rise well into the 70s in lower Michigan. That's what I'm saying. It's cooler in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but the surface is nice. Northeast, area of cooler air, 50s and 60s, but not terrible. Southeast, typical June type stuff. And it's not too hot in Texas, but it's going to get into the 100s, probably in 90s and 100s, and the further south you get. But out west, it is hot. It's above average. Heat advisories up, red flag warnings. It's ridge in place, and it's just pretty hot out west. So, Storm Prediction Center outlook going forward. This is tomorrow. Marginal risk does stay around. Severe weather threat, I would say, stays around for the eastern Carolinas, southeast Georgia, all the way up into the Tidewater, Delmarva area. General risk of thunderstorms across the northeast. And then we do have the marginal risk across the Gulf coastline into Texas, and even a slight risk for southwest Texas. And then we got a marginal risk across Montana and actually across Oregon and northern California. Now, guys, I do think the pattern is going to begin to shift. It's been active down here for what feels like 2 months. It might have been 2 months, where the southern high plains, Texas, New Mexico has been getting hit time and time again. I'm about to talk about this, but I do think the pattern's about to shift, and it typically does. When you get into June, severe weather, I would say higher end severe weather threats begin to shift further north, especially when you get to the later portion of June. The jet begins to get north and stays there for a couple months. And then as we start to get to late August, early September, it begins to dive down a little bit more. And then by the time, we get into late September, really October, November, that's when your secondary severe weather season really gets going across the South. But it's always a process. And, as we start to get into day 3, this is for Wednesday. Big marginal risk across the northern Rockies. We got this little area across the Midwest, and then severe weather chances maintained, level 1 out of 5. Dark green areas across Texas. Now, we get to day 4, which is Thursday. There's nothing out there. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so there's nothing really going on out here. But if you read the discussion, it does say some 15% risk areas could be warranted across the northern high plains. And this is the reason why, guys. We're going to start off Wednesday afternoon. Most of your flow at this point is up here across the Great Lakes region. This is starting to look like your typical summer type stuff. There's little kind of embedded areas of flow down here. There's not much, but just enough to get some storms going. But we start to get into Thursday. This is when we have little areas of energy shooting. First off, there's a mid-level jet going right into the west coastline, going across the Rockies and light flow, light to medium flow, 20, 30, 40 knots of flow kind of going over the Rockies. This kind of ejects out the Rockies into the high plains here. So Thursday, we're probably going to get some severe weather in this area. Kind of some northern high plains magic. Storm chasers love to chase up here. And then we get into Friday afternoon. Still some flow kind of riding on top of this ridge and kind of dipping down across the Midwest areas. And we got more of an injection of flow right here with a jet stream digging across the Pacific and across areas of the Pacific Northwest. So enough flow will be overlapping, enough moisture at the surface for high plains standards. And we're probably going to get some severe weather chances across this region up here for Friday. And then we get into Saturday, and it's the same thing. We got to watch for some severe weather. I just think it's going to become active across the northern high plains. And there's one thing you'll just note here, and even into this coming weekend and early next week. One thing to note here is if I kind of back this up, let's go all the way back to Wednesday. You're not seeing a whole lot down here. There's not any shades of purple or red or whatever, blue down here. Most of your flow is riding on top of the southern tier of the country. There's little pockets here and there that will probably get some thunderstorm development going, but because there's no really clear sweeping cold fronts, as you're starting to get to say Thursday, we got this tongue of moisture getting all the way into the northern plains. Dew points in the 50s and low 60s will absolutely get the job done for a thermodynamic that's being overlapped by the supportive kinematics up here in the high plains. So you got a lot of tropical moisture building all the way up here into the higher latitudes of the lower 48. Okay, and then we get into Friday, and this maintains just a tongue of moisture all the way up into Canada. Okay, but tropical moisture is pretty much setting up shop for the long run across the southern tier of the country in the southeast, the deep south. I mean, we're starting to get into mid-June at this point as we're getting into this time frame. And once you start to get to about mid-June across the south, it's hard to even buy a cold front until about August, maybe late August, I would say. And sometimes it takes all the way till late September. So as you notice, you get day 7 to day 10. This is getting into early next week. I mean, dew points in the 70s. As far as the eye can see, I mean, you might get some weak cold fronts here and there, but they only provide relief for all of 24 hours. So the summer grind is about to get going. Guys, that's all I got. Appreciate y'all's support. Thank you for everything. And we'll do another video tomorrow morning. God bless.